United States District Court, Supreme Court of the United States, Amicus Curiae brief of Christ commanded in defense of sacred personhood, birthright citizenship, and the rightful supremacy of living souls over legal fictions. Introduction. Christ Commanded is a religious nonprofit organization duly registered as a 501c3 under the group exemption of ICCI. Christ Commanded ministers to the homeless, the unborn, the poor, the marginalized, and all those abandoned by failing systems and hardened structures. As a spiritual and humanitarian institution, it operates without allegiance to any political party or ideology, and speaks solely in accordance with the Holy Scriptures and the lawful rights endowed by our Creator. Question presented: whether the 14th Amendment's guarantees of birthright citizenship and equal protection extend fully to natural persons and religious institutions, and whether the continued elevation of artificial entities, such as corporations, over these groups constitutes a constitutional and spiritual violation requiring judicial correction. Jurisdiction and authority to file pursuant to Rule 29 of the Federal Rules of Appellate Procedure and equivalent Supreme Court rules. Christ Commanded, a religious nonprofit corporation under 26 U.S.C. Bar 501c3, submits this Amicus Curiae brief in support of constitutional birthright citizenship and human personhood above corporate legal constructs. This brief is submitted independently. Should the court require leave to file, Christ Commanded respectfully requests such leave on the basis of its unique spiritual, moral, and humanitarian interest in the subject matter, which is of national and eternal importance. This brief is submitted with the understanding that its arguments bear directly upon any case where the interpretation of the 14th Amendment's equal protection or due process clauses may materially alter the balance between corporate legal personhood and natural citizen rights, including, but not limited to, emerging federal initiatives such as Project 2025, which may exacerbate disparities in political and legal standing. This filing is made urgently in light of the Supreme Court's ruling in Trump v. Casa Inc. No. 24A884, decided June 27, 2025, which clarified that failure to timely object to legal and regulatory imbalances may permanently bar future relief. In obedience to that ruling and to preserve its right to constitutional redress, the Church asserts its stake now, before justice becomes foreclosed by procedural default. Citation of basis of belief. Christ Commanded asserts its doctrinal and constitutional alignment based on foundational scriptures and legal doctrines that establish the supremacy of divine law and natural rights over man-made constructs. These include, but are not limited to, Genesis 1:27, humankind made in God's image, Proverbs 14:31, he who oppresses the poor shows contempt for their maker, and Isaiah 1:01-2, condemning unjust laws that deprive the poor of their rights. These scriptures, alongside the Declaration of Independence and the First and 14th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution, inform our belief that no artificial entity shall take precedence over a living soul made by God. Statement of interest. The Christ Commanded Church submits this brief not merely as a faith-based nonprofit, but as a constitutional stakeholder whose members, mission, and community activities are materially impacted by unequal legal treatment under federal property access laws, lobbying privileges, and the statutory interpretation of nonprofit capacity. The Church has applied directly for surplus land access under federal programs and has witnessed firsthand the systemic barriers that favor corporate entities over faith-based humanitarian efforts. Furthermore, the current legal framework permits demonic or antinatalist ideologies to claim religious status and assert abortion as a form of sacrifice or ritual, granting them constitutional protection. Yet ministries that seek to protect life, honor the unborn with burial rights, or reclaim spiritual custody over the discarded are denied land, recognition, and voice. This inversion is not only a theological offense, it is a structural miscarriage of equal protection. The First Amendment was never intended to sanctify death while silencing mercy. Yet in a Maimonic legal order, that is precisely what occurs. Wealth, not life, is the qualifier for religious legitimacy. Constitutional basis for relief. The 14th Amendment guarantees equal protection under the law to all persons born or naturalized in the United States. In recent decades, however, courts and legislative bodies have increasingly elevated artificial persons, corporations, PACs, and other legal fictions above living souls. This brief asserts that such elevation undermines the intended constitutional structure and spiritual order. Natural persons, particularly those organized as religious nonprofits or ministries, must not be treated as subordinate to profit-driven corporations. The First Amendment protects religious exercise. The 14th guarantees equal protection. Together they form the constitutional basis for redress. To deny birthright citizenship or to erode the rights of faith-based nonprofits while extending privileges to for-profit conglomerates is to invert the foundational purpose of the Constitution to serve the people, not the paper. The framers did not fight and die for the commodification of humanity, but for its freedom, both spiritual and civil. This court has the authority to reaffirm these foundations by recognizing that religious nonprofits exist not only within constitutional protection, but within divine commission. A nation governed by law must never forget that its highest laws were built upon the acknowledgement of a higher power, and its greatest promise lies in serving the least of these. Legal argument precedent, numerous precedents, Citizens United v. FEC, Burwell v. Hobby Lobby, and others have affirmed the rights of corporations under the First and 14th Amendments. Yet those decisions also open the door to arguments that living persons and their spiritual entities are due even greater protection. Where a for-profit is granted religious exemptions, so too must a faith-based nonprofit be granted equal or superior latitude. Where lobbying rights are extended to artificial entities, so too must spiritual institutions be granted public voice. This brief argues that constitutional jurisprudence has veered too far in favor of mammon, that is, economic power cloaked as personhood, and must return to its rightful grounding in human dignity, moral stewardship, and spiritual parity. It is a known truth that wealth can build nations or destroy them, but never sanctify them. The legal system, if left unchecked, may continue to reward those who have monetized power while silencing those who speak only for the voiceless. This imbalance, while defended as lawful, is unholy, and it is this court's rightful jurisdiction to correct it. National significance. The outcomes of these decisions will shape the soul of the nation. As courts redefine personhood, citizenship, and constitutional reach, the result will not only affect federal statutes, it will determine whether the United States remains a nation under God or one governed by profit and pretense. The Christ-commanded church bears witness to a pattern of increasing discrimination against religious nonprofits, while global corporations enjoy unprecedented legal privileges. This trend signals a dire need for judicial course correction. If the court fails to act, future generations may no longer distinguish between a state governed by law and one ruled by commerce. The birthright of every American, especially the voiceless and the unborn, hangs in the balance. To ignore this moment would be to forfeit the legacy of liberty to an unaccountable economic priesthood. Standing of Christ Commanded has legal standing as a registered nonprofit under 501c3 and spiritual standing as a church operating under divine mandate. It holds no allegiance to political parties, derives no profit from litigation, and serves its mission at personal cost. Its members include citizens, veterans, single mothers, former inmates, and unborn children, those whose rights are most easily dismissed by abstract legal doctrines and economic hierarchies. The church acts as a living petitioner, not in search of advantage, but to demand that the soul be heard. Motion for leave to file pursuant to Rule 37. 2b of the Rules of the Supreme Court, Amicus Christ Commanded respectfully moves for leave to file this Amicus Curiae brief in support of petitioners' respondents. Amicus has no financial interest in the outcome of this case and submits this brief to offer spiritual, legal, and moral insight into the questions presented. Word count certification pursuant to Supreme Court Rule 33. 1D. This document contains fewer than 6,000 words. According to the word processing software used to prepare this document, it contains approximately 3,950 words, excluding the parts exempted by Rule 33.1D. Respectfully submitted, Reverend Dr. Jake David Beard, Christ Commanded Church, 7300 Pirates Cove Art, Unit 1037, Las Vegas, NV 89145, Christ Commanded at Gmail. Come 702-753-107, Counsel for Amicus Curiae.